Welcome everyone to the Apex Sunday podcast, where myself, Robert Ross, and John Dowsett talk about Formula One news and events and races. And this week we're talking about the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And John, before we talk about what I consider basically a farce of a race, I don't know about you, let's talk about the passing of Frank Williams.
Tragic. Well, it's not tragic. He lived a long, incredible life.
He did.
And it's the end of the garagista, what Enzo called the garagista. Mm-hmm. And that, yeah, it's sad that that's the end of an era. But what a huge legacy.
Yeah, I first got into Formula One in 1992 with the Grand Prix of Spa, which Schumacher won his first victory over Mansell. And I learned about Formula One that year. And what struck me about Williams at that time, at least, they had the active suspension, the Renault engine, the semi-automatic gearbox or whatever it was. You know, they had all these innovations at the time, and they were just way ahead of almost everyone else for the most part. And
Mercedes of the day, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Absolutely. Yes. But at that
even
time,
more so.
Yeah, they struck me as, at that time, F1 was a little bit more loose with the rules. So we had V10s, V8s, V12s for engines. And the Renault was a V10, if I remember correctly. And, you know, Patrick Head, Frank Williams, just, they really impressed me. And that became my favorite team at the time. Now, not so much. I don't really have too much of a favorite team. I know you're a McLaren guy. And Williams, although they have the name, it's not Williams anymore, but I'm glad they're keeping the name. And then I look back into the past with Rosberg winning a championship with them, the Piquet Mansell days, the Prost with Senna, Prost with Damon Hill. They had Senna very, very briefly at Williams, unfortunately. Moved on to, Bottas, and who was it? Maldonado won a race for them. The Bottas and Massa years, and then obviously the Stroll with Massa. Now we have Latifi and Russell. But you were into F1 well before me, so you have a bit more perspective on Frank, and you were around when he had his accident, weren't you?
Yes. I think that his ruthlessness is brilliant. And I think he's handed more non-champions championships than anybody else. I don't think Damon Hill is I don't think that Jacques Villeneuve, I don't think that we could go on, who won championships, belonged having the title. And it was because they just had the most dominant car and they were the number one driver for the team. Guy's a ruthless man who came from nothing and didn't have money. There were a couple of guys that, from my Mosport group that worked for them. Oh, yeah. And they were delivering engines to the Canadian Grand Prix. And when they tried to deliver the engines, which they were Cosworth DFVs, and they had to deliver the engines to Frank, and he didn't have the $250 to pay for the delivery charge of the engines. So he was ready to drive away. And the driver came running up and, gave Frank grief and handed over the money. The driver paid for the engines.
Right. Yeah. But different world back then.
Different world.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. But, we have McLaren and Williams as teams named after their founders.
Yes.
I was wondering, does Lawrence Stroll own Aston Martin, or the actual car company, or a big part of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Of course, he doesn't own all of it, but he bought a great deal of it. Yes.
Right. So we're not going to have Aston Martin called Stroll anytime soon.
Right? Hopefully not. Yeah.
And I wonder if they'll release a car called the Stroll, but maybe not. But I saw recently you can get a Gucci Xbox for $10,000.
Whoa.
So I thought maybe Aston Martin will come out with this, the Aston Martin Stroller.
And, it's the right color.
And that'll be $10,000 as well. But anyways, let's move on to the race, and we'll start with qualifying.
Before we do that, I can't remember the last race that I missed.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously, I cannot remember the last race that I actually missed, and it had to be pretty epic for me to miss a race in the last 40 years or so.
Right.
And I seriously considered not watching this race for the first time, just because of where it is. Mm. And I actually considered not watching it because of human rights, because it's the most of the funding for terrorism comes from Saudi. Mm-hmm. And anyway, I just had to throw that in.
We saw Vettel do his women's event for karting, and Lewis was wearing the rainbow colors on his helmet. So small things. But before, I guess, we go into qualifying, what did you think of the circuit? Like, did you see the layout and how fast it was going to be before qualifying? Because I didn't. For the first time in a while, I was concerned about the safety of the drivers, because it's a crazy, crazy circuit. The blind corners, I don't know. It was, and, it kind of proved to be the case that, the race was chaotic. The F2 race was chaotic. So
close to tragic, the F2 race.
Yeah, I think there needs to be some changes. And then we have Massey coming up. Well, we'll make some minor changes. And some of the drivers are saying, we're going straight through these corners anyways, just make it a straightaway so we can see up ahead, because they're seeing too many of those lights warning about slow traffic ahead. And, if we jump quickly ahead briefly to the Lewis Max smashing incident where, they slowed down to let him pass, and Lewis seemed confused. At the time, I thought, I wasn't thinking about the DRS line and so forth, because frankly, I thought that the rule was if you let someone pass, you have to let them have two corners subsequent to letting them pass, and then you can pass them. But, Max, after some restarts, just went right by him or right away. So I'm not sure if that's the rule anymore. And, this goes back into all the rules being confusing. But I thought that Lewis was confused and also wary of, like, is he slowing down because there's an accident up ahead or something like that?
I don't look at it that way, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves. You asked about the track. I think the track is an abomination, and I think it should be taken off the calendar immediately. I agree. It's dangerous for qualifying. It's just ridiculous. There isn't even room for drivers to get out of the way. Yeah. We were watching it and thinking, where are you going to go? And you're going to come around this blind corner at full chat, and there might not be anywhere to go.
Yeah.
Just totally ridiculous. I think that Vito San Marino suggested that it was like a go-kart track. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'd be great for go-karts. It'd be a fun track to race. When I first looked at it, I thought, I'd love to drive that, but not in an F1 car. Oh my God.
Qualifying wasn't too bad compared to the race. I thought Aston Martin out was in Q1 was kind of a surprise. They're up and down all the time, and same with the Alpines. I mean, Ocon got into 9th and Fernando into 13th, but compared to the last race, other than the results with Ocon, quite a change. And then we had Mazepin a second behind Schumacher. I mean, that's huge at this point in the season, when it's not a lot of braking. It's not a lot of slow corners where you can lose a lot of time and so forth. So,
have you listened to the radio? Have you ever listened to Mazepin's radio?
I don't recall.
If you listen to his radio, when he makes a mistake or he doesn't make it into, as he never does, make it into Q2, they're just blowing sunshine up his rear end and saying, you did a great job. You did what you had to do. And all that tells me is that Mazepin is funding the team.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so let's just pat him on the back and say, aren't you doing a great job? Because you're basically putting money in Gene Haas's pocket is what he's doing. So
yeah. Schumacher is like, you rarely see and these teams that are at the very back of the grid, sometimes it's very hard to figure out how good or bad the driver is. But in this case,
it's obvious.
Schumacher is a lot better. Yeah.
every race he's off the back.
Yeah. And then, we had Sainz go out in Q2. I did expect a lot of spins, but I didn't expect Sainz to do that. But, it's a very difficult circuit. And
anybody could have done it on that track.
Absolutely. And then we had Q3 with Max locking his tires. And then couldn't he have prevented slamming into the wall once he'd done that? No, you don't think so?
I really don't think so. I mean, he look at those front tires start sliding, and you've got to be so accurate on that track. And how much room for error was there on that corner? How much runoff is there? 2 feet maybe? So no. And that run of his in Q3 was absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
Until it wasn't. And that.
But you have to appreciate the effort though, right? Like, why not?
Yes and no. Initially he just jumped up the ladder as far as what I thought of the guy. And then I realized, you know what? Any driver can do that. Any driver that makes it to F1 could do what he did. And what he did was actually quite ridiculous. And and so look what happened. You don't see the top old guys doing that. And it was the old guys that were the wise, proven drivers that were further down the grid other than Lewis, like what you said about Fernando Alonso, way back. Vettel, way back. Why? They're smart. They know that they have to get the time in, and their car has to be ready for the race.
Right.
And if you want to go over the edge at Monaco, it's a lot safer to do it at Monaco than it is there. But in a lot of ways, it's like Monaco at Monza speeds. And what a silly track. Yeah. So no, I don't respect Max for what he did. And then we go forward to what happened in the race, and it just gets compounded.
Right. Let's move on to the race. It being the fastest circuit, or one of the fastest circuit on the calendar, the first 16 laps took 40 minutes because of the safety cars.
Yeah.
I don't have too much to say about the race itself because it was dominated by crashes and spins and safety cars and virtual safety cars, and that incident with Max and Lewis with the let by, and Max going off circuit pass 2 or 3 times. And, it was just a chaotic, embarrassing race. And I saw a post from the F1 Twitter saying that the Schumacher Villeneuve race, that was the last of the season back in, was it 97? 96?
Yes.
Was like one of the greatest races of all time. And I thought, no, it wasn't. It was an embarrassment. It was terrible. I was very disappointed in Schumacher just ramming into Villeneuve. I mean, we've seen this before with him, and we saw it with Senna. Some argue we saw it with Prost. There's always debates, but we even talked about this. We don't want to see the season end this way. And I'll read you a quote from Casey Stoner, who recently went back to the MotoGP paddock, and they asked him, what life lessons did you learn from the paddock? And he said, unfortunately, I've probably learned more in a negative way what to expect from people, what people are capable of, let's say. That was my biggest thing, because I was always the sort of person that would penalize myself when tarmac runoffs came into the corners. When I ran across because I made a mistake, I let a couple riders through because, I'm sorry, there was gravel there before, and I would have lost a lot of time. I remember my team being angry that I'd lost that time and not gone straight back onto the back of where I was. But I was like, no, I made a big mistake. I need to be kind of penalized for that. Then he says, but seeing what other people were capable of, and that they only thought of themselves, especially when you're racing. And I understand you have to think of yourself, but you have to respect your competitors out there. As we've seen, it's life and death. People do die doing this. And of course, motorcycle racing to this day is a bit more or probably a lot more dangerous than F1.
Absolutely.
And I think people forget that a little too quickly. So respecting your fellow competitors, I think, is a very, very important thing that maybe we've lost a little bit. During my racing days, I learned to never underestimate what humans are capable of when they want something badly. I learned to keep my eyes in the back of my head and on a swivel, and to make sure that I knew where every attack was coming from. And that sums up basically what I now think of Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
It was building up to this. I was kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt. I was giving Christian Horner even the benefit of the doubt. But to me, Christian Horner is one of these guys who's had surgery to reroute his colon from his behind to his mouth, because, you can defend your driver, but this is just, it's just hard racing. And then, oh my God, what happened? Lewis needs to be banned for a race because his front tire hit Max's rear tire in Silverstone. I mean, it's just a big mess to me. And I was very disappointed in this race, in the circuit. And it's back early next season. Some of the drivers are demanding changes, but I don't know, we might see a few, but not many. So that's basically my take on the race.
Yeah, I'd rate the race a 1.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rate the race a 9 in regards to opening my eyes. I've always sort of thought Max had needed to mature more.
Mm-hmm.
But what has become very evident that is he is being encouraged by Horner to drive the way he's driving.
Yeah.
And not only that, he is doing what Schumacher did, which is win at all costs. Michael Schumacher, who had the process of, I'm going into this corner and I'm going to pass you, and if you don't get out of my way, I'm just going to hit you.
Yeah.
And everybody knew that was the way he was going to drive. And if I get penalized, Schumacher's thinking, if I get penalized, so be it. I've got to get by you to win. Mm-hmm. And so there you go. And the only difference is that Max is not doing it as intelligently and as slyly and as professionally, because he got away with it. Yeah. When Helmut Marko comes out and apologizes for Max brake testing Lewis Hamilton.
Oh, he did that? I didn't hear that.
It kind of gives it all up, doesn't it? It just throws it all out there. And what was it on the telemetry? 2.4 Gs?
Something like that, yeah.
And if you're passing somebody else, let's think about this for a second. I mean, it's really quite simple. If you have to let somebody by, number one, when I let people by, I didn't get offline. It's your job to get by me. I might point you through. I might back off ever so slightly, but I don't want to lose momentum. And he shouldn't have wanted to lose momentum. No, what he did was violent and evil and incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
Like phenomenally dangerous. And now you want to talk about all the nonsense that's going on with Lewis and why didn't Lewis just pass him? Well, you don't do that in Formula One. And so he wasn't expecting it. And yes, telemetry showed that Hamilton backed off as well as Max backing off.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that whole sequence is a mess and lack of communication as well. I keep singing that Led Zeppelin song, Communication Breakdown. People didn't know what was happening. Yeah. No. And, there was also, I was a bit surprised that, I heard Lewis was whining a lot more than he usually does. I mean, okay, but that when Max was going on about Lewis not being 10 car lengths behind him, I didn't realize that only applies to the very first formation lap, and after that, it's not applicable anymore.
I don't know what the whining thing is with Lewis, because I don't see it. I don't hear him whining. I hear him questioning things, but I don't hear him whining. 5 years ago, he used to whine.
Yeah.
But now he not so much. I mean, he's giving valid point.
I would just say that it was just a little bit more like he just seemed a little more on edgy this weekend,
and rightfully so.
Yeah, because of the stakes and Max and so forth. So you're rating the race a 1.
Yes.
I'm going to rate it a 3 because of my driver of the race, which would be Ocon. You can go on about, it was luck and all that, but again, he took advantage of the situation he was in to the maximum, and he just got pipped by 1/10 of a second from Bottas at the line. So again, these drivers that optimize what they can in their situation always get my respect. And Lewis was really lucky to not have his wing be taken off and have to pit and try to win the race. The championship might have been over then. So, now we're down to, the next race, even on points with Max having one more win. Who's your driver of the race?
I don't really have one. No? I really don't. I could pick Bottas, and I could pick Ocon as well, but I can't really pick a driver of the race. Right. I guess I should really pick one, and I guess it really should be the same as yours, because it was impressive considering what he was able to do in comparison to what his teammate did. Yeah, and I agree with you. I had a hard time with this, because the race is such a chaotic mess, basically a farce. It's like, who's the driver of the race, But I thought back on it, and I thought Ocon did a great job. So, and speaking of which, who did they vote driver of the day? It was Max, wasn't it? It was Max. Here's this guy that gets 10 seconds of penalty, is driving like a NASCAR driver, and they give him driver of the day. Yeah. Absolutely ridiculous. And I'll tell you something. This next race coming up, I don't care who the driver of the day is in my mind. I've never voted for driver of the day. I've never sent in who I thought my driver of the day should be, but this time I will, and it will be Kimi Räikkönen, just to say goodbye to him. Yeah. I'm going to miss Kimi. Yeah, there's a lot less fanfare about Kimi's leaving than usually we get, but that's kind of his personality as well. So it's also what's going on. When was the last time they came into the last race tied? Yeah, I know. It's amazing, isn't it? Have you ever known one? And they're coming into the last race tied, and you've got a mature, smooth driver who's very calculated against a pit bull. Yeah. Well, Christian Horner has said that he doesn't want to win it by crashes, and Max is a better driver than Lewis. So we'll see who wins. Christian Horner says that. Yep. Yeah. No, whatever. I mean, the problem now with whatever Horner says is I can't even listen to it, because I know that 99.9% of the time he's doing it just to throw in a barb with FIA, stewards, whoever it may be, to try and get a leg up. And it has nothing to do with what fact or truth is. Yeah, well, that's why I said, he's had that surgery, because everything that comes out of his mouth belongs in a toilet, basically. So... yeah. Not good. Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to news. Not too much in news. Barcelona has renewed their contract. Frank died. That's news. Yeah, but we already talked about that. Right. And the top three motorsports in the world, number one is, as you would expect, is Formula One. Number two, which surprised me, was MotoGP. And number three, which was a big surprise, is World Superbikes. Really? Yeah, they're all international racing series. Yeah. I guess that gives them an advantage, but Superbike hasn't been doing too well lately. But this year, we had Top Rack beat Jonathan Rea for the first time in 6 seasons. So, they have a new winner in Superbikes. It's been 6 seasons of Jonathan Rea. So maybe it picked up because, it was the last race of the season determined the championship. So I was a bit surprised by that. Giovinazzi's to Formula E. That seems to be a popular place for XF1 drivers to go to. And back to the Aston Martin. They've signed chief aerodynamicist Eric Blandon from Mercedes. So they're definitely, building up their team. And again, we may see the Aston Martin Stroller
coming up in the future. We won't be buying it, but people in Monaco and so forth might be buying it. Anything in news for you other than Frank passing away?
No, I'm waiting for an announcement for Porsche to say that they're. But no, that's not going to happen for a couple of years. No, there's nothing really in the news other than there's a lot in the news that it's about to happen. I mean, Kimi leaving and Formula E seems like a holding tank before they move on to another series.
Yeah, I think it's their next year is their last year of their Generation 2 car, and then after that, it's the Generation 3 car. So I suspect, batteries will be longer lasting and better and that kind of thing. But, it's good that F1 and MotoGP are going to renewable fuel and carbon free by 2025 and 2027.
Yeah.
Because, I agree, like, we need all the solutions, all the possibilities to get off of fossil fuels. So battery technology needs to develop and needs to be more cleaner for mining and so forth. Perhaps the hydrogen engines will come into play, and we'll see what F1 and the MotoGP comes up with. These major car companies making the move to do that, they've seen the writing on the wall. They have to do it. And for those who are addicted to the noise of motorsports, the non-electric cars with clean fuel, I suspect will be very loud as well. So
clean fuel is going to, I can't see how clean fuel is not the future. Mm-hmm. The infrastructure is there for it. We already talked about this. And then you've got companies like Cielo Waste Management that's producing clean fuel from garbage.
Right.
They're taking telephone poles and styrofoam and wood chips and whatever and creating clean fuel. Taking garbage.
And in every single instance, whether it's battery power, hydrogen, or these new clean fuels, we have to make sure that they're telling the truth. Because there's something about blue hydrogen that's apparently been talked about, but people have looked into it and it's just a bunch of nonsense. So, there's always that kind of factor. But
yes.
So next race, we have Abu Dhabi. It's the showdown. And again, I hope there's no bad crashes that determine the championship. People talk about the Schumacher Villeneuve thing, and the thing is that Schumacher got disqualified for that.
Senna?
Yeah, Senna. But
disqualified?
The last example was Shui, and Max Jost knows Schumacher well. He was his teammate. I just don't want to see it end badly, but I have a feeling it will. So we'll see. What do you think?
Well, all they need to do is get Perez to take out Hamilton, right? And then Perez gets the penalty and Max wins the championship.
Right. Well, hopefully.
Or you get Bottas to take out Max. This is not NASCAR. No, I don't agree with any of that stuff. I'm joking about it, and I don't have great hope that we aren't going to see Max do something absolutely ridiculous. And then he is definitely not going to be the champion and might not even be in the charts for the year if he does that.
Yeah. The other thing I will say is that Max post-race has said, well, why did I get penalized? Because in Brazil, I could do it. And it's like, yeah, you could, because Brazil was a mistake. It was a total oversight and they just let you get away with it. And to me, that's the chief problem, is that, some of our listeners have mentioned Charlie Whiting, would he do a better job? And Charlie, we knew his name, we saw him occasionally, but he wasn't always in the news. Where Massey is always like, oh, we're doing fine. There's no reason to do this, that. I think it has gone downhill, the policing of the sport. You can say there's too many rules. That may be the case, but it's just that the rules need to be enforced properly. And again, in MotoGP, they had this thing, well, you just touched the green, maybe we don't give them a penalty. They just said, forget it. We got sensors in the green area. The bike touches that, their lap's canceled.
And either you come in draconian and you nail everybody on everything, but you can't make this like a figure skating contest
Yeah.
where you've got judges who are saying, "Nope, he's cool."
Yeah.
No, it's cut and dried.
They need to find the line, and right now it's just absurd, and that's
Yes.
why it's so ridiculous, and it's frankly embarrassing for what I just said. The top motorsport in the world is Formula One, and they can't even get their rules clear each race. So
Yes.
when the drivers are saying they're confused about the rules, that tells a lot, I think. So, you know, such a great season in terms of two drivers running for the championship, but it's being spoiled by this kind of nonsense, unfortunately, at least for me.
Me too. What wonderful stuff lower down. My initial response is I think Max's super license should be pulled, but
it won't be.
It won't be.
No, but I genuinely don't want him to win the championship anymore. I mean, last race I was thinking it's okay. You know, he's pretty hard sometimes. Maybe he'll smarten up, but this race showed that's not the case whatsoever. So
absolutely.
But if he does win, I'll be happy for their crew and all that, but not for Max and not for the top management. So if you do like this podcast, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And John, we'll talk to you next race.
Abu Dhabi. Look forward to it.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rob.